Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
Educator, historian, Dr. Alan Singer, regular with Media Watch. Glad to have you with us. We're doing this the Wednesday before what would theoretically be our Monday airing on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions, Zoom's technology and software, and the four of us.
And today's date is July 2nd,
The
2020.
Wednesday before the Monday, July 7th. Yes. A lot of stuff going on. And hovering over us is the fact that the House of Representatives is trying to gather to start some kind of vote to see whether the big betrayal bill, that's my term for it. I stole that from somebody at some other major network because I refuse to think that anything that horrendous could be called beautiful by anybody in his right mind. But that bill may get a vote while we're taping. Who knows? They're supposed to be gathering in D.C. to get it resurrected in the House, a version in the House, now that the Senate has done what they did. But before we get into the weeds of any of that, one major story that's big for media people and for the country is the fact that Paramount, the parent company of CBS, has decided to settle with Donald Trump, and they've agreed to pay him $16 million for his bogus lawsuit challenging the way they edited the Kamala Harris interview that aired on 60 Minutes last summer. Alan, I don't know if you dug into what the historical background was on why they settled, whether it was Shari Redstone, but historical precedent, what does that say?
Well, this is the thing. Paramount has a merger being with something called Sky something or other, Sky Media. And that's being investigated by the Trump
Federal
people.
Communications Commission or whatever. Yes.
So Paramount basically settled because they want that merger to go through because it's worth a lot of money to them. So they gave up on the idea of freedom of the press because now they have not pleaded guilty. They've not agreed to having done anything wrong because they didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. As a matter of fact, their chief of the CBS News quit because they didn't do anything wrong. Now, recently, Disney made a similar settlement. And what's scary, and Bob, you could talk about more, is that this frightens any media from taking any stand and doing any reportage.
No, this is scary. This is a true caving in of Paramount, and they basically sold out their CBS News division with this settlement. Basically because it's cheaper than going through with a lawsuit. And Shari Redstone wants to go through with this merger, which means it's $1 billion deal. She doesn't want to lose that. That's the reason for the settlement. And it tells the press that we're not going to back you if money is involved. And a couple of weeks ago, we had the airing of the play Good Night and Good Luck with George Clooney. And, he goes in, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically, Edward R. Murrow has to fight with his own bosses, CBS, to get his program on Senator McCarthy, and he wins. In this case, CBS loses. The company is backing off and caving. And this is a black eye for the press, and it won't be the last one, as you were just saying, Alan. Others will probably cave as well.
Unfortunately, the fact that George Stephanopoulos misspoke about Trump being liable for a judgment against E. Jean Carroll, which he mislabeled as rape when he was on air, they sued ABC, Disney, for, I believe, $16 million or something to that effect. or that's what ABC decided they would pay to settle the fact that Stephanopoulos misspoke. But one of the judges actually did say the sexual assault that he was actually convicted of, even though it wasn't rape, in the normal parlance of vernacular speech, was actually rape. He was convicted of raping
By the law of New York State.
just because the legal term that the settlement came out, which said sexual assault, when Stephanopoulos misspoke, that minor misstep by calling it rape instead of sexual assault put ABC on the hook for a possible loss. They may have won had they chosen to fight it, because the sexual assault in common parlance, as one judge said, is actually can be conflated with rape, because that's what she accused him of when she filed the suit. But because ABC caved, CBS decided, why should we I'm thinking for them now, put ourselves through millions of dollars and years of lawsuit with this bogus guy who we know is not going to give up because he likes to litigate anyway. And it's going to jeopardize our merger with Skydance. So we're going to settle. And that, unfortunately, but I understand from the article I read in the New York Times, the Freedom of the Press Foundation has threatened to file a lawsuit on behalf of the shareholders of Paramount / CBS, because they don't think they should cave. They don't think they should give in. And their threat was, if they give in and they settle, we're filing a lawsuit against them and whatever for this particular step. So let's see how that unfolds. Maybe the Freedom of the Press Foundation may win in the end. Who knows? Paramount may end up paying the Freedom of the Press Foundation a ton of money for the shareholders before it's all over. But enough of Paramount and the press caving, because most of these, we saw the cartoon we put on Media Watch 6 months ago when Ann, what's her name was, did the thing about Disney and Facebook and the Washington Post all kowtowing and bowing down to Donald Trump as a prescient and accurate editorial cartoon depicting how the mainstream media was caving to this guy. She knew what she was doing when she drew that cartoon, and we endorsed the fact that she was right on target. And then the Pulitzer Prize people agreed with all of us and said, yeah, give her the Pulitzer Prize for that, a body of work. But I think it was that one cartoon that got her the Pulitzer Prize. What's her name? Ann Tenenbaum or something to that effect?
I can look it up, but we should
cartoon.
point out that the cartoon did not run
Yes,
in the paper it was supposed to, the Washington
these
Post.
books killed
Yes,
it. That's
yes.
correct. And guess what?
but
She
but
quit.
yes,
She quit. All right.
yes.
Just like the executive producer of 60 Minutes quit. And of course, the president of CBS News may have quit, but Alan, I think you said she was forced out. Yeah, I think she
No,
was.
she quit. No, she quit. They may have tried to force her out, but she quit. She
Okay.
was very clear about that.
So there are people who are trying to stand up, even if their corporate bosses are bowing down and knuckling under to this bloated bully who keeps trying to throw his weight around. But let's get back to how and why he can throw his weight around, because the recent Supreme Court ruling about injunctions, where a lower court judge said you cannot toss people out of the country and claim that they're not citizens or whatever by being born in this country just because their parents were not citizens. There was an injunction, I believe, that was filed by a lower court saying, stop trying to do that. And the Trump administration took it to the Supreme Court, took it to a higher court, and it ended up in the Supreme Court. Alan, you want to talk about what the Supreme Court 6-3 ruling was and how that blew up in their faces, but turned the country into chaos?
All right. Look, what we have now is a president who has no commitment to law and no commitment to the Constitution. He is clearly breaking the law in a number of cases, and the legislative branch, which is dominated by his lackeys, will not stop him. What has happened is that federal judges have issued what they call universal injunctions, where they said that this action, this executive order, clearly violates the Constitution, so it should not be allowed to go into effect.
That's the executive order about stripping birthright citizenship.
Now, what the Trump administration did is it went to the Supreme Court in an emergency, but they did not argue that the executive order was constitutional. Instead, what they said is that federal district judges should not be allowed to make a ruling for the entire country. Not only that, they should not be allowed to make an injunction that goes beyond the original plaintiffs. So if 3 people sued and they issued an injunction, only those 3 people would be protected. What this allows Trump to do is to basically break the law, knowingly break the law, until a case could go all the way to the Supreme Court, which could take years. Now, what happens is Sonia Sotomayor and Jackson and Jackson both wrote dissents. These 6 right-wing judges all said, okay, if the Trump administration doesn't like these universal injunctions, we'll throw them out. But what happens is what Sonia Sotomayor wrote is that the government didn't ask us for an injunction about the actual case because they knew it was unconstitutional. Birthright citizenship is assured in the 14th Amendment, and that the government would concede this. So they asked the court to rule on a technicality on whether the injunction was correct. Now, Brown Jackson goes further, and she says it is important to recognize the executive bid to vanquish so-called universal injunction is at bottom a request for this court's permission to engage in unlawful behavior. And she said the court has gone along with that request. Now, after Sotomayor and Jackson issued their dissents, Coney Barrett wrote the response for the court 6-member right-wing majority. And now Jackson, she accused the majority of looking at the text and interpreting it in ways it was never intended to be interpreted. Basically, finding ways to justify what they already wanted to do because of ideological reasons, which is a direct violation of judicial practice. But Sotomayor and Jackson raised philosophical and legal issues. Coney Barrett made an ad hominem attack on Sotomayor, the only Latino.
Jackson Brown.
Jackson Brown, who is an African American, and accused them basically of ignorance of the law. And I got to say, I read her ad hominem attack as fundamentally racist.
Now, the problem with that decision is that it basically, you go to federal court when there's a federal issue that spans more than one state. That's the entire point of going to a federal court. And this decision says that a district court's decision shouldn't spread beyond the 3 people involved and the rest of the nation, which is backwards. So I don't get it at all.
Most legal scholars don't get it. Most legal scholars don't get it. Most legal scholars have been saying that that is a total misinterpretation of the 200 years of constitutional law, interpretation of constitutional law. That's what most legal scholars have been saying. But there is this thing about cherry picking judges for getting things to play out nationally when the Republicans were trying to push their abortion agenda, would take certain things to a federal judge in Texas somewhere to get him to rule so that they could stymie Joe Biden's push for more equitable stuff dealing with transgender, for whatever. And basically, that one judge in Texas would put his imprimatur on what the Republicans wanted, and then that would spread across the federal judiciary and would apply to all the states. And everybody, when it went to the Supreme Court, they didn't say there was anything wrong with that then. But here it comes with Trump wanting a curtailment of one judge making a ruling that would spread nationally. And this 6-3 Supreme Court said, never mind how we ruled before during the Biden administration. This is how we're ruling now during the Trump administration. So that's what part of the reasoning that Ketanji Jackson Brown and Sotomayor was saying. This flies in the face of all the stuff that we have ruled on in the past. You have cherry-picked and strategically done your textual reading for political purposes here and broader interpretation, not textually, for political purposes here. And so they basically are saying, you guys are trying to have it both ways. As long as it supports what Donald Trump is trying to do, you're going to cherry pick and rule the way you want to. And so maybe it was, even though she didn't call names when she wrote her opinion, siding with Sotomayor, Ketanji Jackson Brown actually pricked the 6 majority people so deeply with the accuracy of her analysis that Barrett had to personally attack her. That's why she attacked her personally.
Yeah.
May not have anything to do with race. She was just upset that she was called out for doing what she was doing.
All right, we have to be careful. It's Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Brown Jackson, right.
I know, I got it back.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But
Okay, just to keep us on, we have about 10 minutes left. I figured I'd give you an early warning because we have a bit to go over.
So legal stuff that's going on, this has totally turned birthright citizenship, upended it across the 50 states. This is going to be a state-by-state situation. It's too deep and too complex to go into right now. But because they won on this supposed birthright stuff, that's going to make things difficult for people to actually claim birthright citizenship till it gets to the Supreme Court once again. They're now going after people that have been naturalized. They're looking for any kind of violation of any law to use as a pretext to say, you swore to uphold the Constitution and the laws, blah, blah, blah. You committed this crime. You're no longer naturalized. We're going to kick you out. They started this like 3 weeks ago, back in June 10th, June 11th, with another executive order or another whatever filing. But it's now come into a much higher profile because of the racist Islamophobic attacks that the GOP and the guy in the White House, who I cannot refer to as the president, has now launched against the actual winner of the New York mayoral primary, Mamdani, okay? He's a Muslim, he's a naturalized citizen, he won this primary fair and square. And talk to me, Ray, what's this guy been accused? What are the GOP, what are they doing? What are they saying? Talk to us.
They're saying that he's not really a citizen. He's been here since he was like 8 years old, right? They're looking into it. You know, they basically they're going to violate the law. You know, they're going to find something, some little thing, and
well, they're going after his naturalization citizenship. They're saying,
absolutely.
Okay.
But you know, as you were saying, he's a naturalized citizen. This is part of the Constitution. He is a citizen if he's been naturalized, and it's done legally. There was nothing illegal about it, and it's a fact that he is a naturalized citizen.
The 14th Amendment says if you are naturalized, natural born.
I know, but you know, the people who currently occupy the White House don't recognize the Constitution until it benefits them. You know, like in the Espionage Act that they're going to go after journalists with, which is another story that we need to get in at some point. But it's just, I don't even have words for it, Eric.
Bob,
It's so absurd.
I was just saying that you're right, Ray. He's lowered the bar. We keep wondering when he's going to hit bottom, but he just doesn't. And now he's accusing Mamdani of being a communist.
It goes down and up. It goes whichever way he wants it to go, right or left, up, down, whatever he wants to do, he does.
So, Alan, let's get into the fact that Mamdani is now scaring the living daylights out of these GOP people. That's why they're coming after him with all kinds of crazy nonsense about he's not a citizen. Oh, he's a communist. The man has said outright, I'm a democratic socialist. He's named himself for what his political predilections are, where he stands. They want to call him a communist. They want to call him somebody, I think, even tried to call him an anarchist. I forget what they're getting so bent out of shape because this man brought out so many new voters. Alan, talk to us about how well he tapped into the young voters and what coalition forming he did.
Well, one of the things he did was interesting. He talked to people. You know, he was all over the place talking with potential voters, explaining who he was, listening to their issues. The other thing is very effective use of social media with a lot of, like YouTubes that really went viral. Like there was one of him talking to a halal vendor, and the vendor's explaining the difficulty in getting a permit. And, so he listened to people and he posted it online, and people really appreciated that. I mean, the thing that was striking is that not only did the politicos think that Cuomo was going to win, but Mamdani trounced him by 56-44. Overwhelmingly, people voted for Mamdani.
Well, and he had the youth vote on his side as well. Yeah. That was a big factor.
This was in the first round. He had him beat handily.
Yeah.
That 56, 43, 46, whatever, 8 to 10 points, 10 to 12 points. It was a significant surprise lead. And it surprised me that it wasn't a closer race, even though I didn't think Cuomo was going to get a 50%. I thought it might have been a three-way race. And I'll tell you up front publicly, I put Mamdani on my ballot. He was my number 3 choice, but he was on my ballot just because my perception was there were too many old line politicians in this primary.
Absolutely.
And Cuomo, seen him before, didn't like the way he left office and all the other charges that were pending that he wouldn't address properly. Brad Lander, seen before. Scott Stringer, seen before. Adrienne Adams, who actually was my number 1 pick because she seemed to be an effective city council speaker, seemed to be able to cut through the noise and actually try to get things done. So the bottom line was, I, like a bunch of other New Yorkers, were tired of the same old, same old. And so Adams, Mamdani, the bottom line was I was ready for change as well. The problem with the Democrats, hardline, old line folk, and Alan, you can speak to this better than most of us. You got that historical perspective. They don't seem to understand that people are ready for substantive change. Talk to us about how the freak out happened with the Democratic Party when this young man won that nomination.
Well,
we don't have much time, so we got to do this quickly.
Schumer and Jeffries and Gillibrand. Now, Gillibrand is from upstate. Schumer and Jeffries are from New York. All three said, well, we're going to meet with him because we have some concerns. They congratulated him on his victory, but they would not endorse him. And what holding them back is he refused to renounce an earlier statement where he had said globalized intifada or something to that effect. Now, the intifada actually means globalize the struggle, but it has come to mean the war of Palestinians against Israelis, especially the war of Hamas against Israel.
Hmm.
And so that's a problem. You know, what he meant is not what the common parlance meant. But he has denounced terrorism. He has no way identified with Hamas, but they're using that as a weapon against him.
And so they're expecting the Jewish population in New York, which is the core non-Black, non-Hispanic core that most people try to court to win an election in the city of New York. Correct, Alan?
Look, but I suspect that when the breakdown comes, he did very well in Jewish neighborhoods. You know, not the religious neighborhoods, but in the secular Jewish neighborhoods. And you know, I had voted for Brad Lander #1 because of his experience, and he had been my city council rep. But I voted for Mamdani #2 because we went to the same high school. 50 years apart. No, I voted for him because of the issues that he raised, which I identify with. But and I was very glad that what Lander did with the co-endorsement, and then my vote went to Zohran.
And with that, we have a little bit more than a minute left.
So I don't know. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we could talk about. We don't want to forget Gaza because there's still bombs dropping. There's still people getting shot when they're trying to collect food. The European folks said that they want this food distribution stuff that the U.S. and Israel put together to stop because it's ineffective and it's causing people to die trying to get food. Said the choice between starving to death or getting shot to death is untenable. So they're calling on this to stop. That's the European Union or another European group of folk. You know, bottom line is your guy in the White House claimed that there's a 60-day ceasefire coming soon. I don't know what to believe. So anything else before we wrap?
Just a little note, Elise Finch, the late meteorologist for WCBS Channel 2, New York, she died a couple of years ago, too young at 51. She was entered into the Mount Vernon High School Hall of Fame, which is terrific because it's a great legacy to leave behind. And with that, we're just about out.
She was a fabulous weather reporter as well. So this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.